I wanted to see if you had any reaction to MLB's plan to combat the use of grip enhancers.
Reaction. I'm glad. I mean, good. I mean, it's a rule, and they're going to enforce it. I applaud Major League Baseball for, you talk about it. That's a tough spot. It's a tough spot. There's a lot of tentacles of this, and they've even going back to the end of 19 with Chris Young in the commissioner's office. He was starting to get on top of what this looked like, and the process and figuring out. And then COVID hit, and it got very much derailed, understandably, and so it kept churning. And now baseball has done their part to collect the appropriate amount of evidence to support that this is a real issue. They're clearly documented now that this is a issue that needs to be corralled, and I applaud them for doing that and being proactive. And anytime there's something that's going against a policy or a principle or a law, it's always reactive to it. So I applaud Major League Baseball for reacting to it and putting together a plan in place to do their best they can to eradicate it. And I think they've done just that.
In terms of the 10-game suspensions for first-time offenders and when you can use the sunscreen and the rosin, do you think overall it's a pretty fair, workable set of rules and guidelines?
I think it's going to be adapted at some point, to create, some kind of standard for grip that is necessary for the pitchers to unify that. At the moment, that legislation, hasn't taken place, but so the rules on the books, it's black and it's white, and here it is, and they created a line, and it's really nothing new. That's just the enforcement of it.
Last thing, and I know yield the floor, but I talked to a few hitters, even some pitchers, who said that there is time, and I think you've addressed this too, where if it's hot, you want pitchers to be able to grip the ball so they don't end up hitting guys. So is that sort of a fine line to walk when you talk about adapting this rule? Or
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one thing that the league's going to do is allow guys to go their mouth a little bit more, blowing their hands. In the summer, it's not as big issue because some guys sweat more than others, but you can go and get some moisture that way in concert with your rosin or your saliva or whatever that looks like. The cool weather's maybe a little bit more of a challenge for that to happen. But it's pitchers, and we have some, and there's been guys that have pitched in the Hall of Fame that have not used it and figured it out, and that's just how it needs to be. And people can gripe, complain, moan, whatever, but it is what it is, and it's being enforced, and you play the game according to the rules.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jim. AFJ.
Rick Hummel, St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
Shildt, we're coming up on 100 at-bats for Sosa. Is that enough of a sample size to determine if he is a regular player in the big leagues? We're just not sure at what position, kind of like Edmund was a couple years ago.
I think it's a good barometer. I wouldn't, I'd put it in heavy pencil. Thing about sample sizes are crazy. It's just kind of like our team. I mean, 15 days ago, we're being lauded to being, one of the better teams, and, we have a rough stretch, which is going to happen. And, the sky's falling. So, a guy can go out in Sosa's case and have, 20 at bats and hit 12 balls well and not get, but, anything to show for it 3 times, and his numbers look different. And then I wouldn't potentially evaluate him differently. I do think it's a representative size where he can show he's earned the opportunity to continue to get more of them. And I do think he's a good player, and that will have an opportunity to be a regular type player and figure out. The good news also is that he's got multiple skill sets to play multiple positions, to your point of Edmund.
until you see him play for a little bit, do you really know how smart or how cagey a player he is? He looks like he is that category.
Yeah, that's the thing that we knew. He didn't have as good, to the point of performance. He didn't have as good a spring as he would have liked, I'm sure. And but we knew what we had in the kind of player and skill set he had, so we put him on the team, obviously, and he's earned that opportunity, rightfully so. The one thing that I've been very pleased with is the winning mentality and how he looks to play the game. To your point, there's not as many nuances taking place in our games or people thinking about some of that as potentially in the past. And to have a guy that's looking to make a play, like we talked about last night in the pickoff with Yachty, the Butcher Boy play he did in Los Angeles. He's just done some high IQ baseball things that until you see a guy play, you don't know he's capable of, but he clearly has done it. And those are those things similar to Edmund. We talk about, those are the things that aren't going to show up in a spreadsheet but do show up in a win column.
And I see you had your pitchers out for bunting practice. You're scouting pitchers for bunting practice this afternoon. Is that going to be a thing of the past here after this season, do you suppose?
I think so. I mean, look, we just so everybody knows, it's not like we just showed up today and started bunting, but we usually bunt underneath. But because day game after tomorrow, we getting some regulars off the field a little bit. So we took advantage, got the pitchers on the field for their bunting today, which we've been overall one of the better bunting clubs in the league. And yes, I think that you're going to see whenever the last National League games played this season, you're going to see it in a different format moving forward historically.
Are you going to miss that style of game?
I am, but I don't think anybody's going to hear me. I know you are as well.
Thank you.
Derek Gold, St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
Mike, with the policies for Major League Baseball today, did they in effect take it out of the hand of the manager to have to wrestle with the etiquette of pointing it out? Is that something that's happened here? Is that culture going to change?
Well, I mean, the managers haven't done it. I mean, there's been, answer your question, yes. The onus is put on the umpires, which, is that right, wrong? Well, they are in charge of policing the game and enforcing rules of the game. And so the more onus is going to go on the umpire. That's one of the reasons the 6 days are taking place for the conversations and the training to look and the proper protocols to be in place with the umpires. We as managers have a right to still go out and ask for help, or ask for to check in on a player. If we think he's and players have that right too, to do it as well. But there's also, if the league deems that that's done in the form of gamesmanship, which is obviously subjective, then, for example, I went out in the second and third situation on an opposing pitcher, and they felt like I was doing that to throw him off his game, distract him. Actually, I have a chance of being ejected for gamesmanship. So I don't think you're going to see managers do it a whole lot. I've said my piece, and now it's really up to the umpires in the league to enforce it.
That's what got me curious, is because we've talked about this for years, essentially. At least the last 2-3 years, but it was like how to get, no pun intended, your hands around it. But it was also part of the etiquette of being a manager, where there were times where you probably thought a guy was doing something on the mound or using something, but didn't call the attention, right? Because it wasn't part of the game.
Correct. And look, you got to make sure, you don't want to put a bullseye on your club's back either. So when the opportunity presented itself in Chicago, a couple of weeks ago, that's when I meditated about it, prayed about it, and said, you know what, it's time to. I've been given a platform to speak on it. I got an invitation, and so I spoke on it. I thought appropriately instead of having to interrupt a game.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Brendan Schaefer, KMOV-TV.
Mike, with KK making his return tonight, what's your expectation as far as workload or pitch count? Do you think he'll be on track as normal, or kind of ramping back up?
I mean, we think he's be as normal. He hasn't been down but 10 days. So, you know, if you think about in the past, you get to about the third month of a season. Now he did start the season a little bit later, so I get that. You know, you could skip a start. You know, the All-Star break's coming up. So I think he's built up to be able to throw. We'll obviously evaluate like we would any night, how hard he's working or how easy he's working to say, you know, we know we took him over 100 last night in the sixth. Wasn't working overly hard, still locating his pitches. He's working hard, not locating his pitches, and he's, you know, at a lower pitch count. That's still, you know, indicative that we might need to make a change. If he's throwing well in the 90s, we'll let him ride.
Jeff Jones, Belleville News Democrat.
Mike, Tyler Glasnow met with the media this afternoon and mentioned that he had stopped using sunscreen. He said 2 starts ago that was the thing that he had done, and that he feels that is the reason he came up injured last night, is that he was having to increase his grip pressure and increase his grip strength as a result of this change happening in the middle of the season. Is there a concern for you from that perspective, from how the injuries might result, not only in terms of hit by pitchers, but also theoretically how it could affect pitchers, not only on your squad, but also maybe around the league as well?
I haven't thought about that, so I didn't hear anything about that. Hopefully that's not the case. I don't really have an opinion on it initially. I usually got to think about something. The hit by pitch rate's gone down the last 2 weeks. And just so you know, our hit by pitches prior to the last 2 weeks are at higher rates than they've been in the last several years. So.
Ryan Fagan, Sporting News.
Hey, Mike. Wow. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm just curious, what do you think the sport's going to look like after the June 21st deadline comes and goes? And when they started cracking down, are we going to see suspensions? Are we going to see offense change? How is that going to work?
You know, Ryan, I don't have a crystal ball to the suspension part. I don't know how that's going to look, so I don't want to hazard a guess because that's what it would be. My educated guess on the game itself, I think you're going to see a lower strikeouts. You're already seeing an increase in batting average over the last 2 weeks. I think you're going to see a more offensive game. I don't know what you're going to see relative to walks and hit batters. I think that's probably going to, you know, ebb and flow a little bit. But I think you're going to see a better version of our game relative to what we're used to seeing. And I say that, you know, everybody's got their own version of what game they like, right? But I think you're going to see a more traditional game that maybe we grew up with on this call that is more about balls in play, more action. You're just going to see, you know, you can see appropriate amount of offense, and you're going to see guys that, you know, are be able to put the ball in play, and you're going to see a regression potentially, maybe not even potentially. You're going to see a regression in certain guys from a pitching standpoint.
Mish, you have one more?
I do. We saw Bader tracking balls during some extra players were hitting today. What kind of things should we look forward to in the next few days with him?
Well, what we're looking for that you may or may not see, of course, we're going on the road is, and I don't believe he's going to go with us, is, you know, increase in swings, increase in swing effort level, volume. Talking to Willie today, looked like he threw pretty well, felt pretty good. He's moving better. So you're just going to see as he continues to, he's going to ramp up his activity based on his soreness level. And his soreness level still there was dissipating.
He's doing some swinging though now.
Very light.
He would certainly need a rehab option before he could rejoin you, right?
My guess is that would be the case. I mean, you know, we were optimistic he wouldn't, but he had not necessarily a setback, just didn't have as quick as recovery. So, yeah, I would anticipate him going to get some at bats.
Is Williams close to returning now or yet or not?
He's going to go today and tomorrow, and then we'll evaluate after that.